okay.
Yeah,
What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back.
Hungry, but
It's been 2 weeks since we talked about. I'm going to go back and read a little bit to you, the last part of chapter 21, so it gets us into that. I'm starting at verse 37. And if you remember, Paul was on his way to Jerusalem. And during his whole trip, he would get signs telling him, don't go, because something's going to happen to him. Remember, Agabus come, took his mantle or whatever he had and wrapped it around him and said, the person that owns this will be tortured in Jerusalem. But Paul was dead set on getting to Jerusalem. And so he got there. And he was praying in the temple, and they heard him. And the Jews, the crowd, they pulled him out of the temple and started to beat him. And the captain of the army there found out, or, seen him, beat him.
give me the phone.
Here, later. And sent centurions, which is 100 army men, sent centurions in and got him. And as they were taking him away, that's where we're at in verse 37. And Paul was led to the castle, was to be led into the castle. He said unto the chief, may I speak unto thee? Isn't that like Paul? Every time. First thing he'd do when he'd get into a city is do what? Go to the temple and speak. That's what he wanted to do.
No.
And his main goal was he wanted the room to be full of Jews, people he could convert. And as they led him to the castle, he said to the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days madest an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? See, they thought he was somebody else. But Paul said, I am a man, which I am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Sicily. So he was a Jew himself, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs, which giving him license definitely meant it gave him the permission to speak. Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with his hands unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, in the Jewish tongue, saying, and then the chapter ended. And it's like you're watching a movie on television, like we watch this show called 911. And we're watching it, and they're in space, and you think, well, they'll get back to Earth. Well, they cut it off, and we have to wait a week to see if they make it back to Earth, which, by the way, they did. And
Barely.
So we'll go down to 22. So he starts to speak. And he says, men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. So he's like, you know, they're wanting to beat him up, and he's going, whoa, wait a minute, let me talk to you. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silent, and he saith. So they, being the Jews that were around him, remember, he's on the stairs going up into the tower, and they stop about halfway and they let him speak, and it says that he spake in the Hebrew, that's Paul, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city. So he was born in Tarsus, but he was brought up in Jerusalem. Remember, they're in Jerusalem. Under the feet of Gamaliel, and Gamaliel was the leader of the synagogue at that time, Paul was a scholar. I mean, you give him a book and he'd read it. He couldn't get enough. They couldn't get enough books to keep him because he wanted to read so much. It says, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous, or he was, another word for zealous is he was
gung-ho.
Gung-ho. There you go.
That's it.
That wasn't what the dictionary said, but
that's the redneck dictionary.
Yeah, there you go. But he was gung-ho toward God. Now, you got to picture yourself. And that's what I try to do. I try to picture myself in Jerusalem at the time. What were they? They were all gung-ho toward God, the Jews. Gung-ho toward God. But they didn't believe the scripture. They thought the scripture said that they was going to send somebody to save them. Well, they did. He sent Jesus Christ. But they didn't think that was how he was going to do it. They thought he was going to come in on a big white horse and just rule everything.
Almost like end times. Yep.
But Jesus didn't want to do that. Jesus wants to just rule their hearts. And that's what he wants to do with us. He wants to rule your heart. You know? And so these people, when they heard that and heard him speak in the Hebrew tongue, and that he was zealous toward God, they couldn't believe it. They were all silent. The crowd just went silent. And it says, I persecuted this way unto the death. And back then, if you was a Christian, you had to be careful because they would kill you. They would stone you. They did stone some.
Right.
They did. Stephen was the main one. He was zealous toward God too, but he wasn't in the perfect manner of the law. They were Old Testament. They believed the scriptures,
right,
except the part that Jesus And they knew that Paul and Stephen, they knew that Jesus was the one they were talking about. They knew that Jesus had come to save them. And Jesus talked about building the temple again in 3 days. They couldn't understand all that, how he was teaching.
Stephen was a devout Jew.
Oh, yeah.
That converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
Paul was a devout Jew.
Yeah.
That converted to Christianity. That Gamaliel, he was the number one teacher of the law.
Yeah.
A devout Jew that taught the law and lived strictly according to the law. And Paul thought, sure, his testimony, he could win these devout Jews that he was speaking to.
Right. And Paul, before his conversion, was like Raymond said, they couldn't get him enough books to read about God and the scriptures. And he kept, so he tries to show them that he's educationally, you can't get no better than him.
One of them.
Yeah.
He's trying to convince them, hey, I was where you are. I was just like you, a devout Jew.
And it says, and I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering unto prisons both men and women. And so, and also the high priest doth bear me witness. See, if you remember, what did he carry around with him? He carried letters that he would go into the city, showing that he's allowed to persecute the Christians. He did all that. And all the estate of the elders, from whom I also received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. So remember, he was on his way to Damascus. And what happened to him?
Got blinded.
Had a head-on collision.
He had a head-on collision with a light. And it came to pass that as I made my journey, now see, Paul's just recounting all this to these people as he's standing on the stairs. If you don't remember that, and you just read, you're thinking, well, he just done this. But he done this a little while ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And he's now just recounting everything he's done to them to show them who he is. And it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. And I fell unto the ground and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul. Remember, his name used to be Saul, not Paul. Why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And if you remember what he said back about what's the exact words they ran about?
It's hard for you to kick against the pricks.
Yeah. It's hard. It was hard for Paul. Deep down, it was hard for Paul to do what he was doing because it was affecting. He didn't know it was affecting Jesus, but it was affecting Lord. He says, "Why are you working against me so bad, Paul?"
I preached a sermon up here years and years and years ago that I entitled "You Big Ox," because that's what kicking against the pricks. When you were training a yoke of oxen,
Yeah.
they would put a board across with sharp projections, And when the ox got, unruly and stuff, they'd kick, they'd kick and they'd hit them pricks.
Yeah.
And that's what God was doing. He said, I'm trying to get you where I want you, Saul. It's hard for you to kick against the pricks.
Yeah.
He was kicking against Christianity. He was kicking against Jesus all the time, but it wasn't doing him no good. But the Lord was getting him where he could get yoked up with him and be of use to him.
Yeah.
Just like they would oxen.
Yeah, they had to train him.
Yeah.
And he was training Paul. And they that were with me saw indeed the light and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to him. Now, there's people out there that try every way in the world to say the Bible contradicts itself. And they'll say that's why it's not truth. But if you go back where Paul, the actual part where Saul was seen the light, you'll notice it says that they did not heard the voice of him. It says that they did hear. But it's like if Andrew's in the back room there and he's talking to somebody, you'll hear a mumbling.
Right.
But you can't tell what he's saying. And that's what they heard. They couldn't hear the voice. They couldn't hear the words like Saul was hearing the words, but they could hear something, a murmur or some kind of sound.
Muffling, yeah.
And so, but people will try to say, well, see, it says they didn't hear it here, and it says they did hear it here. What's the truth? And you have to really, dig deep and remember that when we talked about that before, that we talked about it, they didn't hear words. They just heard mumblings. They heard something, but it wasn't, they didn't know what it was.
Right.
Saul knew what it was.
And it's also like if somebody witnesses a car accident,
Two different perspectives.
you're going to get, if you got 3 or 4 people that witness it, you're going to hear 3 or 4 different stories of the same accident, and they'll all be truthful, but it's from their perspective or their point of view.
And I think that's the number one reason why there's 4 gospels
Right.
told 4 different ways to give you different perspectives. Even though some of the stuff is the same, what's told in one gospel is not the same as the way it's told in another gospel. So it says, and I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, arise and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told of thee all the things which are appointed for thee to do. And that's what I love. I love how God works, how Jesus will take care of things. He don't tell you the whole plan, He gives you one step at a time. And if you're faithful to do that one step, then He'll tell you the next step on the plan. So here, He told him, arise and go to Damascus, and there it will be told of all the things which are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see for the glory of that light, remember they blinded him, being led by the hands of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man, according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there, came unto me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him. And this Ananias, you remember the story about him? He didn't want, he said, Lord, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to have nothing to do with him. He persecutes
Says, I've heard of
Christians.
this. Says, I've heard of this dude.
Yeah. I don't want to have nothing to do with him.
No good coming
But
of
the
that.
Lord told him, comforted him, and told him, said, do as I tell you. And that's what happened. So Ananias come to him, stood, and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him. And he said, the God of our fathers hath chosen these, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And buddy, you talk about a witness. Paul was a witness.
Amen.
Again, now he's still Saul here, remember?
Right.
But he changes his name to Paul. And now thy tarriest thou, arise, be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. And see, everybody uses that verse as saying, all I got to do is get baptized and I'll be good. Now, what did Paul do? What did he do before he got baptized? He got saved.
Oh, yeah.
He got saved. He gave his heart to the Lord. He said, whatever you want me to do, Lord, I'll do it.
Well, in verse 13, Ananias called him Brother Saul.
Yeah.
He was already converted.
He was already converted,
Called
but
him Brother Saul. Yeah.
but then the Lord says, as an outward showing,
Sure.
get baptized. Show the world that your sins have been washed away. And so calling on the name of the Lord. And it came to pass that, this is verse 17, and it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance. Now, I'll just be truthful with you. I've never been in a trance. Have you ever been in a trance, Raymond? I'd like to be in a trance one of these days.
Not like what Paul was in.
No. Sometimes
I've been caught up in the spirit, but I've never been
in a trance. No. Yeah. Now, so Paul went out, he went out, and for 5 years, 3 to 5 years, preached Jesus. That's all he did, was preach Jesus and converted people all across that part of the world. But now he's back, and it says, and it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying unto me, make haste. And again, what's he telling to do? Get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprison and beat in every synagogue them that believe on thee. So see, he's telling them that's what he did. That's what he did before he got saved. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I was also standing and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that saw him. See, Paul was probably wasn't very old when Stephen was martyred. He was all the older ones. They said, "Here, hold my coat." And Paul stood there and consented to them doing what they were doing. And he said unto me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. And they give him audience unto his word, and then lifted up their voices and said, Away with such fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. Now this is the people there talking. They had heard all they wanted to hear.
They was listening until he dropped the name Gentile.
Yeah.
He said Gentile, which to them was nothing but dogs.
Yeah.
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 When he dropped the word Gentile, everything blew up.
And I think that's a question on your paper. You know, what the difference between Jews and Gentiles were.
Slur.
What did the Jews have against the Gentiles?
Yeah, well, the Jews hated the Gentiles. They treated them like dogs, like you'd treat a dog. You know, they hated Gentiles. And it says, and when he said that, they gave him audience unto the word, this word, and then lifted up their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live, that he is not fit that he should live.
And
they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust into the air. The chief captain commanded him to be brought to the castle. So now we're back to where we started. We're at the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging. Now, what they did was scourging. They scoured Jesus. If you remember that, they took him, they bent him over, and they had a cat of nine tails. Remember what the cat of nine tails was, don't you? It's leather straps with glass pieces tied onto the end of them. They did Jesus. They were getting ready to do him the same way, and bade that he should be examined by scourgers. What they do, they'd whip their back and pull that off of them. Are you going to tell us the truth now? You know, and he'd say no, and they'd do it again. They'd do it again. They did it until Jesus had 39 scars on his back, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman? Remember, he was Roman. He was born in Tarsus and grew up in the synagogue there in Jerusalem. He was Roman and uncondemned. And when the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, saying, Take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. So the captain's telling him, be careful what you do. He's a Roman. And now, it doesn't mean that Romans couldn't be scourged, but they had to have proof. They had to go through the court to be determined that way.
And Paul, he didn't have Roman blood. He had Jewish blood.
Right.
He was a full-blooded Jew, and doesn't tell how he got his Roman citizenship. I've read some history that says that possibly some of his family, father, grandfather, had done something for a Roman emperor, and he'd been granted citizenship, and
Right.
it came right down through the family.
Or it
It
could have
doesn't-
been bought.
He
That
didn't
was
buy
one
him.
way.
He didn't buy his.
He
because
didn't buy his.
That Roman sold the centurion said, "Man, it cost me to
Yeah.
become So somehow his family was given Roman citizenship, although he didn't have Roman blood.
Yeah.
He was a Jew, full-blooded Jew.
Then the captain came and said unto him, Tell me, asked him again, Art thou a Roman? And he said, Yea, which means yes. And the chief captain answered, With a great sum obtained I this freedom. So the chief answered, so he's saying, Did you buy your Roman citizenship? And Paul said, But I was free born. So somebody, his grandpa, like Raymond said, somebody, his grandpa became a Roman, and thus he was born into it.
Yeah.
And then straightway they departed from him, which should have examined him. And the chief captain also was afraid after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him.
And I love that verse. The ones that was holding Paul, they flew the coop.
Yeah.
They took off. They left that chief captain there to bear the blame, because that's how serious it was to touch a fellow Roman,
Yeah.
especially to scourge a fellow Roman. Man, they took off and left that chief captain there, and he was freaking out because he said chief captain also was afraid when he found out he was Roman.
Yeah,
Serious stuff.
it's just like a principal. If his child, if his child's being bullied, and the bully don't know that the child is the principal's kid, and when he finds out, he knows that he's going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Bad trouble. So they scam the same way here. They got out, and it says on the morrow, so the next day, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, he loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before him. So they were going to do it the proper way.
Yeah.
They were going to try to go through the council. Now you remember back when Jesus, he went to Pilate. Pilate says, I didn't want to have nothing to do with him. Then he went on to, who was it, Caiaphas? And so same thing's going on here. They don't want to have nothing to do with him until the council has something to do with him. And that's where we end up, chapter 22.
And the sad thing is, verse 18, when he was talking about, and he said in the meeting, talking about the Lord, said, Make haste get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. God told him,
To get out.
get out, and yet he came back. He had no business.
Back, yeah.
And you'll find Paul's life now is going to be spent in prison. He's not going to be free to go out and teach and preach. From here on out, he's going to spend his time in prison the rest of his life. But, I mean, while he was there, he wrote, I think, 7 epistles while he was in that prison after this. But how sad it is that Paul just didn't do what he was supposed to have done.
And I debated on whether to go on and do chapter 23, but then with 3 or 4 of us not going to be here, I stopped. I thought we'll stop there,
Sure.
and then we'll take it up chapter 23 the next time, which is, let's check, we're getting into Thanksgiving, so.
I think it's the 18th. Isn't it? It's just before Thanksgiving. Yeah, the 18th.
Yeah, the 18th, which there shouldn't be no trouble. That's the week before Thanksgiving. I don't think there's any thing coming up at church, is there?
I don't think so. No. I'm not taking long until I get these treatments and stuff behind me. I ain't going to take anything else.
Yeah.
Take some time off.
How's those going?